Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. I love having John Fund here. I get to embarrass him, it brings him down, but I love talking to him. John Fund from National Review.
Happy to be your willing victim.
See you on Wall Street Journal, of course, the American Spectator, and Fox News, a contributing editor. I'm sure you contribute your talents. Is that why they call it?
I'm just a talking head.
Just a talking head. Well, you talk pretty well. Hey, before we get into a great new book you've got out on Eric Holder, I just want to go through some good politics. The presidential race is already popping up. We've got the Republicans about ready to do the usual circular firing squad that our team is so well known for. Let's go on the other side first. Is it a lock for Hillary? Is this something she wants, she gets?
It was a lock for her in 2008. She was the inevitable nominee. Then a guy named Barack Obama showed up. He sensed political opportunity. Hillary's problem is, well, she has advantages, of course. We know what they are. Money, having been Secretary of State, Senator, lots of support from women.
And she built a resume. She's not just a former First Lady.
That's correct, although she's only run for office and won once in this very blue state, the New York Senate race. So her electoral experience is somewhat limited, at least successfully. Having said that, she's not particularly likable in focus groups. People think she's sort of imperious. They believe that she doesn't fully tell us what's going on.
Gasp.
She's not completely candid. She has problems with the truth. And
that's just
she
being a
doesn't
politician.
Well, yes, but good politicians hide it. She's not a good politician.
But her husband didn't hide it either, and people adored him.
He's a unique talent.
He is a unique talent.
I mean, as someone once said, Bill Clinton was our first existential president because he was so believable, because whatever he said at that moment, he believed.
He believed it.
I mean, there were people who remember in the White House, a group of people would come in on one issue at 10 o'clock in the morning, you'd tell them one thing. Another group would come in for lunch, tell them something else. Third group come in at 2 o'clock, you'd tell them something else. And he was completely convincing every single time.
That's brilliant stuff.
She does not have that capability.
Tell me a little bit about Servergate or deleting emails or that. Is this something that sticks? You know, transparency. I know we're living through the most transparent presidential administration in history, but does that kind of transparency issue, having a server at home, you know, that story? Well, I didn't want our emails about Chelsea's wedding to get out.
Well, you know, there's a joke going around that this whole thing was a misunderstanding, John.
Oh, I'm sorry.
When Hillary and Bill left the White House in 2001 to become ex-First Lady, ex-President, they got a briefing on what was going to happen. And they said, well, these are the privileges you get, you know, as a former office holder. And they told her she was going to have lifetime Secret Service protection. She thought it meant lifetime Secret Server.
Does it stick, though? Is that one of those?
No, it doesn't stick.
Is that just one of those little things?
Voters are interested in jobs. They're interested in, you know, their family. They're interested in a whole bunch of things. But it does matter with the media. The media does not like to be toyed with, played with, taken as a fool. I think it will heighten the level of scrutiny and the sometimes negative coverage that she's going to get as she tries to evade reporters' questions, avoid taking firm stands on issues, the things that she's known for in the press corps. The press corps tilts left, but it also tilts against people who basically treat them with disdain. And she treats them with disdain.
Does she run? I still,
oh, yes, of course.
Really?
She would run from 6 feet under.
Really?
Yes.
She's going to run. There's no question about it.
This is what the arc of her life has been to this end. Now, does she have a much more substantive challenge a few months from now? It's possible. I think there may be other scandals out there.
Do tell.
Well, let's just say it's premature, but the Obama White House might have some interest in raising them.
Why would they have an interest in raising them?
They hold her in minimal high regard.
¿Por qué?
She was an obstreperous Secretary of State. She didn't always go with the party line. And there's the 2008. You know, they mixed it up. I think, though, if Hillary's standing continues to slip, Elizabeth Warren, despite all of her protestations that she's not running for president, she may run as the tribune of the populist working man wing of the Democratic Party.
Do you see any other serious threat that could pop out there?
I don't think Jim Webb or Martin O'Malley or others rise to that. They can be irritants. I think the only candidate who can actually defeat Hillary for the nomination would be Elizabeth Warren if she ran. And of course, as of now, it would still be an uphill climb.
There's some that say it is impossible for a Republican to become president. The way that the Electoral College is split up, that you've got these swing states, and as Texas, is supposed to constantly stay red.
I'm just old enough to remember the 1980s when the Republicans had a lock in the Electoral College and could never win Congress.
Right.
And suddenly, now, because of, quote, gerrymandering, the Republicans have a lock on Congress and the Democrats have a lock on the White House. Every election is different. Nothing is preordained, nothing is predetermined. Each electorate is different. We've already seen in Colorado the difference between who voted in 2010, who voted in 2012, and who voted in 2014. There'll be a different electorate in 2016 based on who's running and who brings out voters and supporters. So I think a lot of this is, well, pseudo-political science.
All right. Republicans have a tact. They have a talent. They've got something I call my first political axiom. There's nothing they can't screw up. And I've seen the circular firing squad. Let's go back. Why didn't Romney win? What was the one thing, if you could have changed this one factor, it could have happened?
We pretty much know. In the exit polls, which are the closest thing we have to really capturing what voters thought, people were asked which candidate had the better ideas. They favored Romney by about 10 points. Which candidate was more experienced and could handle the job of president? Actually, Romney won that too.
Who could create more jobs?
I don't remember that one.
That was Romney as well.
Okay, fair enough.
But
there was one question. Does
Yeah.
he care about people like you? And I think Romney lost by something like 47 points.
It was amazing.
There was no empathy.
There was no feeling that he cares about
right,
you.
and Obama swept that. When you have lose on such a big question, and the 47% number, which was one of the great political boners of our time, was factored into that, he clearly had an empathy gap. And I think that, plus the fact that his sort of wooden and reserved personality didn't appeal to a lot of Republican pink-collar, blue-collar voters. Some of them stayed home. That's why he lost Ohio, for example.
All right. Lesson from that, bringing it forward a year. What is it that the magic Republican needs to know?
Well, you never fight the last war, because the new war will be different, with different weapons and different tactics. I think the three most important elements of this election are as follows. One, Hillary, if she's the nominee, will play the woman card. Historically, of course, she'd be the first female president. That will be one of the calling cards that she plays. But second, it's very difficult for a party in power to win a third term in office. Obviously, parties have done that in the past. Ronald Reagan was able to hand things over to George H.W. Bush. But before that, the last time it had been done was Franklin Roosevelt, when, of course, there was no term limit for president. So it's very rare for a party to be able to win 3 straight elections, because people get upset, they fret about scandals, they worry about old hat. In the White House, there's nothing fresh. And in this case, Hillary Clinton, having served in the Obama administration, wouldn't be offering to some voters something really fresh. We certainly haven't heard that from her. So that's a second factor. The third factor that's extremely important is that the Republican Party does have to accommodate itself to changing circumstances. Certainly there are some changing views on social issues. The shift in gay marriage has been dramatic. And also, of course, every year the percentage of the electorate that's Caucasian drops. So a Republican nominee has to compete more effectively among minority and ethnic voters. Those are the 3 factors. Some of those play to Republican strengths, some of those play to Democratic strengths.
Any odds-on favorites at this point? I mean, who absolutely cannot win the primary for the Republican Party in your mind? Beyond
I don't
me.
engage in absolutes.
Well, most likely. Who's going to have the toughest time?
I think there's some candidates who are running for psychic income. We've seen that Mike Huckabee got a Fox News show when he ran for president. We've seen Rick Santorum got a best-selling book. We've seen other candidates do well. Herman Cain got a radio show. So we've seen candidates running for president who perhaps did not envision themselves taking the oath of office. I think Ben Carson is an extremely compelling figure. I don't envision him taking the oath of office, but I think he's having an enormous effect on the party. I would say the same for Mike Huckabee if he runs again. I would say the same for candidates like Carly Fiorina, although she may well be on the very short list for vice president, because to balance off against Hillary, there might be a Republican nominee who thinks we want a woman
who actually
running mate.
has some experience in the private sector.
She was
would be
the
amazing.
CEO of a major Fortune 100 corporation. She was CEO of Hewlett-Packard for 6 years.
So let's switch gears completely. You've kept an eye on lots of great issues. You and I have talked in the past about elections and stealing elections and integrity in those. You had an interesting, wonderful take on Obama's Attorney General, Eric Holder. You call him the enforcer in your latest book, Obama's Enforcer. Why this as a topic for your next book?
Well, the book has been out for a few months. Eric Holder announced he was departing shortly after the book came out. I don't like to.
Just
I don't
take
think
credit,
that they,
just take credit for it. Just say it was you.
Loretta Lynch, who's the Attorney General designate, probably going to be confirmed very shortly. She will follow in Holder's footsteps. She will follow his policies. She's already said she supports the president's sweeping executive actions on immigration and other things. She might not be quite as obstreperous and combative with Congress as Holder was. Holder, I think, has eroded the rule of law. Democrats and liberals active today in politics, most of their early political memories are of Richard Nixon abusing executive power and authority. Well, frankly, if you look at the Obama administration, whether it's transparency, whether it's freedom of information, whether it's a lot of things that liberals claim they care about, it has been an extremely restrictive, controlling, and obstinate administration when it comes to...
He said this was going to be the most transparent administration
John,
in history,
let me
and
tell you
you're
the
challenging
let
that.
me tell you the most important lesson I've learned from working in Washington for 30 years. Watch what politicians do not watch what politicians say. They watch what they do. And Obama in office has been, whether you talk to the Associated Press, the Committee for the Defense of Journalism, all of the watchdogs of the media, the most controlling, least transparent, most prone to prosecute low-level leakers who are trying to bring government corruption or scandals to light of any recent
I
administration.
think you'd have a hard time getting most people to believe that. Under George W., that was certainly an accepted belief that this guy was breaking laws. He was keeping things covered.
Well, there were problems with the Bush administration, and I've written about them.
But I don't see that people believe that the average voter believes what you just said. I mean, I certainly do. Because I'm a junkie. You're a junkie.
I understand that. But if you talk to the people who actually have to deal with the administration, reporters, people who file freedom of information requests, watchdog groups, they're just exasperated. And let me give you a specific example. The inspector generals in the U.S. government are appointed by the president. Their job is to sit in executive agencies and departments and serve as the internal watchdog to prevent waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption. They're appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. Now, because Obama has been in office over 6 years, the vast majority of them were appointed by Obama and confirmed by a Democratic Senate. It was Democratic until January. So these are the people that Obama picked to be IGs. 70% of them just signed a letter to Congress saying, we have to complain that we are no longer able to do our job effectively, increasingly in our departments because of opposition, stonewalling, and the refusal to cooperate by Obama administration political appointees. These include the Inspector Generals of the State Department, the Justice Department, Michael Horowitz is his name, the Peace Corps, which is trying to investigate a sexual abuse scandal involving female Peace Corps volunteers, and they're being blocked. You go through the list, National Security Council. When 70% of inspector generals, the vast majority of which were appointed by President Obama, say this administration is not being transparent, who are you going to believe? Josh Earnest, the White House press secretary, or the people that Obama appointed to supposedly promote transparency and accountability?
What is Eric Holder's unique value? What is the skill that he offered this administration for 6 years? What is it that he did so very well?
Followed orders.
Be more specific.
There's no example of anything that Barack Obama wanted, said, or wished for that Eric Holder didn't say yes. Attorney General has a dual role. Of course, they're appointed by the president, and they're supposed to carry out the president's enforcement priorities. That's fine. That's why we have political changing of the guard. But his job is also to promote and protect the rule of law. At no point have we seen Eric Holder step forward and say, you know, Mr. President, I think you're going too far. Now, we know the president has gone too far because in the last 2 years, the Supreme Court, 14 times, unanimously, this includes 2 of Obama's own appointees and 2 other liberal justices who were on the court, has unanimously said the Obama administration has gone too far on major constitutional questions.
Including recess appointments.
Recess appointments, Freedom of Information Act, health care, a whole range of things where they've overstepped their authority. They may be about to do that again on Obamacare, the upcoming Supreme Court decision in June on the constitutionality of the exchanges. So Holder facilitated all of that. He didn't stop it. He didn't question it. We have no evidence that he ever did. Now, the problem is this. That can be subject to interpretation. I agree with the president. But let's take what happened. Remember, Holder was accused of being in contempt of Congress because he refused to turn over documents in the Fast and Furious gun running scandal. That's where the administration was buying up guns from gun dealers, shipping them down to Mexico, handing them out to drug gangs, supposedly in some way to try to trace them.
And then find them try to get them, catch them coming back in.
Well, it didn't work, and a border agent died, and hundreds of Mexican civilians died. Well, the documents still haven't been turned over. I think they're eventually going to be pried out of the administration by the courts. So Holder refused to turn over the documents under very dubious grounds. Well, the House of Representatives voted to hold him in contempt. And by the way, 10% of Democrats in the House voted to hold him in contempt. It was bipartisan. Now, at that point, Congress takes the contempt citation, and it's supposed to, by law, turn it over to the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, the federal prosecutor in Washington, D.C. He is supposed to serve it, to exercise and enforce it. Now, the law says he has to do that. Now, the courts will ultimately decide if it's valid. He just came out with a report saying, well, Congress can hold the Attorney General in contempt, but I'm not going to deliver it or serve it. I'm going to ignore it.
Ignore the law.
He ignored the law. Now, at some point, you have complete breakdown of accountability. Congress has no power to demand documents from the administration, even though that's their goal, that's their oversight role. The Attorney General can refuse to turn over the documents. Congress can hold him in contempt, but his deputy, the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia, can simply say, well, it's a scrap of paper, try to enforce it. Congress has no means of enforcing it. This is a complete traducing of the rule of law.
Have we ever seen anything like this?
Richard Nixon.
Be more specific.
Nixon. Well, Nixon's Attorney General ultimately went to prison. Now, largely for his role in Nixon's re-election campaign, but Nixon's Attorney General allowed a whole range of executive overreach to take place, facilitated it, didn't stop it, and the Justice Department basically became a tainted organization. It took years for the Justice Department to rebuild its reputation. I think, although circumstances are different, it'll take years for the Justice Department to rebuild its reputation that it's lost under Barack Obama.
Is it as serious as Watergate? I mean, do you see Holder going to prison?
Of course not. And you asked me the last president that so abused the Constitution and so asserted incorrectly sweeping executive powers. That was Richard Nixon. I'm not saying that the scandals of the 1970s are obvious parallels to the scandals of today, but we don't know exactly how big some of these scandals are because the Justice Department refuses to turn over the documents.
Who was the right AG? Give me the historical AG that, in your mind, not only does what the president want, but also says, no, this is unconstitutional.
I'll tell you the ones who stood up to the plate. After Watergate, Gerald Ford appointed a University of Chicago professor named Edward Levy. He rebuilt the reputation of the Justice Department. Ed Meese was a very loyal Ronald Reagan aide before he became Attorney General. But when Iran-Contra happened, Ed Meese insisted that there be an independent review panel on Iran-Contra. And he broke the news. And he announced that the administration would release all of the material on Iran-Contra. Griffin Bell was the Attorney General for Jimmy Carter. Griffin Bell was a stand-up guy. He investigated Burt Lance, who was Jimmy Carter's best friend, and he was the director of the Office of Management and Budget in the Carter White House. Lance ultimately had to resign. Benjamin Civiletti was also a stand-up attorney general. So was Janet Reno, who appointed a bunch of special prosecutors, which the law required her to do, and expanded their authority so they could investigate scandals in the Clinton administration, of which he was the attorney general. So the rule has been attorney generals can do both jobs. They can walk and chew gum at the same time. They can serve the president's priorities. At the same time, they uphold the rule of law, since they are the chief law enforcement officer in the country.
Has there ever been an opportunity in this administration where Holder has played that role, that secondary role?
I have no evidence. None. For example, the president unilaterally changed Obamacare 29 times without consulting Congress. At no point did Holder's Department of Constitutional Review question that. They just rubber stamp everything the White House wants. If I knew there was an example, I would love to cite it. And I've talked to liberal law professors like Jonathan Turley, who's a big Nader supporter. He is appalled at this executive overreach and says this is exactly what the Constitution is worried about, that an executive would eventually take over and be able to ignore the wishes of Congress, a co-equal branch of government, simply because it had the resources to enforce the law and Congress does not.
Will it take time for history to make all this clear? In other words, it hasn't happened now. This is not Watergate. While the rumblings are there, I'm not hearing it. I'm not hearing it. Will history?
I'm not here to make Watergate compare. I'm here to say the rule of law is in jeopardy, and a whole bunch of people agree with me. And the Supreme Court, 14 times, unanimously, 9-0, in the last 2 years, has slapped down the Obama administration. Scandals can be scandals without involving direct criminal behavior. They can mean a traducing and an ignoring of our constitutional principles and traditions.
The letter that George W. had from his AG saying that what he was going to do in Iran, I'm trying to get my memory straight here, that secret letter that gave him permission to do a lot of things that we've never really seen.
You're talking about the torture memos,
right? The torture memos. Sure. That this is, that we are not allowed to see. I saw the left rightfully.
They've eventually, I think, come to light.
Right, but at the time,
in fact, the Obama administration released some of them.
But the left was right.
Yes.
When they screamed, this is illegal, this is wrong, you cannot do it. Are we hearing it from the left? Is there a growing choir now? You've mentioned law professors.
In some quarters, yes,
and reporters.
but not very much with elected officials. I think there's been some pushback on Obama's negotiations with Iran, because when the White House indicated they did not have to send any agreement with Iran that they made to Congress for review, that raised the hackles of some Democratic members of Congress. But in general, I think there's been an unfortunate tendency to simply say, our leader, right or left.
Is there a legal fix here? Because if this is the precedent, then a Republican president can come in and his AG could do exactly the same thing.
And there will be some Republicans who would be tempted to do that. What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. I think we've exposed in this administration, just as was exposed in Richard Nixon's administration, that Congress is inherently at a disadvantage in trying to protect its prerogatives and its rights with an executive branch. Some changes might be useful. For example, it's very difficult now for Congress to sue the executive administration in power, because they have to have standing. They have to show that they're being harmed. Well, there's a bill in Congress that would make it easier for Congress to challenge an administration and stand up for its rights.
Let's see if I understand this right. There's a bill in Congress that would help them get standing
within the courts.
Within the courts, and so they're going to pass this bill, which needs to be signed by a president in order to make it law.
I think there's some presidential candidates who have said they would sign such a law. There's some presidential candidates who are not. Their top priority is not always arrogating all power to themselves.
There has been the amount of power that the executive branch has seized in the last 6 years is unprecedented. Am I wrong on that? Mind you, there's been a drift for executive power to grow. You can argue since FDR, but I've never seen such brazen changing of laws by executive
The recess
order.
appointments was a perfect example. That was a completely novel theory of a president's power to fill vacancies. We also saw that with things in the healthcare range. We've seen it in foreign policy as well. Other presidents have crossed lines. I don't think another president has crossed as many lines, with the possible exception of Nixon, so cavalierly.
And we catch them when it goes to the Supreme Court, but not all of them make it there. I think about
Supreme Court only hears a small,
Right.
small percentage of the cases
the idea that
and controversies.
we're going to delay a deadline on Obamacare and let this very politically important group not have to pay their penalties until after the election. I mean, how does it stand up? How does it?
Well, the administration's defense is the president has broad discretionary powers to enforce the law. And the courts, I think, are increasingly going to say, yes, but not to change the law. Enforce the law as written by Congress, not to change the law that Congress wrote. That's a subtle but important distinction. We're going to see that in the immigration battle, which is, I'm sure, going to go to the Supreme Court, whether the president had the right to declare effective amnesty for 5-6 million people. And I think, of course, in June, we're going to see it on health care with the exchanges.
Obama's Enforcer is the book. Where can you get it if you want it?
Better bookstores and Amazon.com.
Better bookstores. Jon, thank you. Thank you. Check me out at the Independence Institute. That's independenceinstitute.org. Tell a friend. We'll see you next week.